Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy to have you all join me today. If you're new here, I'm Lumie. I am a polymer clay artist and illustrator. And in today's video, I'm so excited to be creating Goku and Krillin from the 1986 to 1989 Dragon Ball. If you happen to see my community post about this, then it's really no surprise. Thank you to all of you who participated in guessing what this was. I really enjoyed seeing all of the guesses. Just a quick note, I'm sorry if my voice sounds weird. I'm still recovering from a sickness. It's been like 2 weeks since my voice has been like this, so apologies in advance. And also, if you didn't notice, the setup is a little different for the video this time. Thank you to my cousin who lent me her mic. Hopefully the audio quality will be much better now that I have this mic. But I digress. I didn't grow up watching Dragon Ball, but I had seen some clips from Dragon Ball Z while I was growing up. I didn't really know much about it. All I knew was who Goku was and that the fight scenes just seemed to last forever. My partner had suggested that we watch Dragon Ball because he thought that I would think Goku was cute, which I do. And he also wanted to show me Krillin because that was his favorite character as a kid. And he also thought I would think he was cute, which I do. I love them both so much, in fact, that I decided to create this video where I'm sculpting both of them. Also, I know there's multiple ways to pronounce Krillin's name, but this is the one that I'm most familiar with, so that's the one I'm going to be sticking with throughout the whole video. So if you're interested in seeing how I created these pieces, or if you're a dragon of dragon Okay, wait. So if you're interested in seeing how I created these pieces, or if you're a fan of the Dragon Ball series, then keep watching. For this sculpt, there was a very specific image in mind that I wanted to create, and that was Goku and Krillin riding the flying nimbus, or Kintoon, in episode 15, Looking Out for Launch. In the series I watched, her name was Lunch. It's kind of a weird name. To be honest, I was nervous in the beginning that I wouldn't be able to get the pose for Krillin correct because, as you'll see in the reference images, it's kind of like he's hanging on to Goku while they're riding the cloud together. So I just pushed those doubts aside and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna sculpt Goku and then I'll see if I can get to Krillin later. When thinking about what they were going to wear, I decided to have Goku wear the clothes that he received from Master Roshi and have Krillin wear the clothes that he wore when he first appears in the series. The reason why I didn't put them both in the training clothes is because I thought it wouldn't be as interesting if they were both wearing the same thing. And I chose for Goku to wear it because he ends up wearing it even after the 21st World Martial Arts Tournament. And to be honest, I really like that outfit, so I wanted to include it somewhere. Even though I know in the reference images that he's not wearing it, but whatever. I wanted to include it, so it's there. Alright, so with that bit of housekeeping done, we can start working on the sculpts. As with every other project that I've done so far, starting Goku was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I won't even go into detail about how this is my second time making the body because I thought I wanted to make the sculpture much bigger than it was, but then decided I hated it and started from scratch, wasting a couple days worth of work, but I digress. I started his second body the same way that I did for the flower fairy, but it wasn't working the way that I'd hoped. The area between his legs just looked weird. I didn't like how this shape was turning out, so I decided to just make the top half of his body and then bake it. This gave me a much more structured piece that I could add his stomach and legs to, and I found that it did help with creating the crisscross shape of his legs much more successfully. To be honest, I probably could have just created the stomach and the legs first and then added the chest, but I didn't really know what I was doing at this time, and it seemed like the simplest solution just to create the top half of his body, so that's what I did. I added his little tushy, cleaned up the form a bit, and then placed him in the oven. And he does look a little bit different coming out. I decided I didn't like his shoulders, so I just chopped them off camera. I finished up his legs by adding his calves, pushing the clay so that it blends into the rest of his legs, and then moved on to his arms. I wanted to convey that the arms were outstretched since he would be holding onto his ankles once I added the hands. I added the neck, which I ended up removing most of by the end, spoiler alert. Then I added some more curvature to his upper back to make it look like he was hunched over slightly. I also bulked out his shoulders since I didn't think they were wide enough, and then moved on to working on his shoes. For his shoes, I took 2 chunky blocks and smushed them to blend them into the rest of the legs. I then started to cut away the excess so that I could create a more refined shape of the shoe. I did a bunch of cleaning and then added a strap between the calf and the shoe that will eventually be the bottom of his pants. Since the clay was still wet, I used my small silicone tools to add the separation between his toes and his socks and define the bottom part of the shoe. And the base of his body is all complete. If you're curious to see these little milestones while I'm creating them, check out my Ko-fi that I just made that shows some behind the scenes stuff, and I'll have that link in the description below. I started working on his pants. I added clay to bulk up the legs and used one of my sculpting tools to smush the clay around the form, naturally creating some folds in the process. I smoothed out the area with my silicone shaper just to remove any unnecessary lumps that weren't meant to be folds, and used one of my sculpting tools to further define the folds that I made earlier. I also did the same for the other side, which I kind of failed to show because I forgot the transition. Moving on, I started working on the clothes for the upper body, smushing the clay onto the form and adding rectangular shaped pieces around each of his shoulders for the straps. I bulked out the area on his back and did the same as I did for the front. I used my X-Acto knife to define the shape, trimming the excess and cutting out areas like his V-neck in the front and around the back. I honestly really enjoyed working on the clothes. It was satisfying to see how the clay molded and formed itself around the body in a natural way. I could see that because the structure of his form was done, it was easier to add stuff on top of that. I added some folds to this area as well and then moved on to adding his belt. The same as I did with the shoes, I added 2 balls of clay to the form for the hands and blended them into his arms with my sculpting tool. Once I got the basic shape smoothed out, I used some tiny scissors to cut out the shape of the fingies. I saw in a comment on my flower fairy video to try out this technique for the hands, and I didn't mind using the scissors, but I think I still prefer using the sculpting tool. But that's just me. You can try it out for yourself and let me know in the comments what you think. I finished molding all of his little fingies and added his thumbs using 2 tiny balls of clay, before moving on to the bands around his wrists. I finished one of the bands and created the other one off camera. I actually remembered the transition this time. Now just to add the final extra detail, which was a thin strap around his upper body that will hold his
Yoibo,
or his power pole, which is what I'll be calling it for the rest of this video. By the way, look at this photo I found when looking up the name of the power pole. Isn't it so adorable? Alright, let's move on to his head now. I followed pretty much the same process I did for the flower fairy when creating the head. I placed a ball onto the back of one of my sculpting tools and pinched and pulled until it looks like the shape of a skull. What was different this time, however, was creating the mouth. I dug out a mouth-sized hole in his face since I wanted him to have an open mouth smile. I really had to trust the process with this one because I did not like this at first. I sculpted his ears and added those onto his head along with his nose and a tongue in his mouth. At this point, I was starting to feel more confident with how the mouth was looking. Great, so now that we have Goku's body and head complete, we can now move on to the last thing, which is creating his iconic hair. I started off by covering his head in a thin sheet of clay and then used my X-Acto knife to cut out little triangles. I felt a lot of pressure while creating his hair because I knew that it was iconic, and it was also a very unique shape that I didn't know that I would be able to translate into clay. Once baked and set, I started adding the spikes one by one, placing them and seeing if I liked where they were and if the position made sense before blending them into each other and into the rest of the hair. I did that pretty much around the entire head until I was happy with the result. Finally, I attached the head to his body, which I ended up doing 3 different times because I was not happy with the way his head was angled. Now that Goku is complete, we can move on to making all of the accessories. So the accessories I'm going to be making are, as I mentioned earlier, the power pole. I'm also going to be making his little bundle, and I'm going to be making his grandfather's Dragon Ball. I rolled out a long piece of cylindrical clay, cutting it to create the holder, and then rolled out an even thinner piece of clay for the pole itself. Once baked, I attached them together with some oven bake adhesive. To finish off the pole, I cut away some added clay to make tiny straps across the ends. My original plan was to attach the power pole to his back, since that's how I was in the cartoon, but I soon realized I'd have to come up with another solution later on. But for now, the power pole was done, and I can move on to creating the bundle. For the bundle, I just planned to cover a piece of aluminum foil with some clay, just wrap it up, and then boom, I'd be finished. But I was so wrong. For some reason, I had a lot of difficulty creating this. I even looked up a tutorial on how other people wrap this, and it was actually very helpful. Would it be embarrassing if I said that it took me 2 hours to make this? Lastly, I made the Dragon Ball, which was just a ball of clay, so I didn't need a tutorial for this one. And there we have it. All the parts for Goku and his accessories were all complete, and now we can move on to making Krillin. But before we get into that, if you're enjoying this video so far, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. I have a goal of reaching 1,000 followers by the end of this year, and I would appreciate it if you could help me achieve this goal. If not, no worries. I thank you for stopping by. With that, let's get into Krillin. Krillin is up next. When starting to sculpt Krillin, I knew that his form was the most important thing to get right. I made sure that while I was creating the body and the legs, that I was constantly checking it with Goku's body. Once I was happy with the rough shape, I grabbed some clay for his legs and attached the 2 smaller pieces of clay to his torso, making sure that they were slightly tilted upwards. Then I baked it in the oven to set the shape. I moved on to making the calves, ensuring that the legs would still be able to rest on Goku's. I also had to account for the fact that I'd be adding clothes on top of this, so I had to make sure that this form wasn't too thick. I checked again while adding the arms for the same reason. It would look weird if his hands weren't able to rest on Goku's shoulders, so I had to make sure that I had the right length. I blended the arms into the form, cleaned them up a bit, and baked it to set the form once more. I don't really have a specific time for when I bake them, it's more like I really need this to be solid so I don't mess it up while I work. Here's what it looks like so far. Moving on to the shoes, I made them the same way that I did for Goku. I added chunks of clay to the ends of his feet, blended them together, cut the excess, smoothed it out, and boom, it was done. I used my silicone sculpting tool to define the different areas of the shoe, like the sole and the area around the ankle, before moving on to his hands. You will see that the process is pretty much exactly the same as I did with Goku. The only difference was that I kept checking to make sure that the hand position made sense and that it was touching Goku's shoulders. I cleaned it up and there you have it, his hands and shoes are complete. For his clothes, I began with I think they're socks, or are they like warmers? I'm not really sure, but whatever they were, I started with making those, and I didn't make them too thick as to not cause too many issues when placing them back on Goku's legs. Once they were done, I moved on to making his pants by adding chunks of clay and shaping it around the form to make it look more bunched up. I then completed it on the next side. To finish off his pants, I added the part by his waist and hips, which I ended up thinning down quite a bit because it was impeding on his hands being able to reach Goku's shoulders. I added some more clay to his torso to start working on his robe. Once I had the clay all smoothed, I used my sculpting tool to carve the crisscross sections to make it look like it was wrapped around his body. I cut out the V-neck near his chest and started building out the other portions of his shirt before blending all the bits of clay together. I also made sure to keep his sleeves pretty puffy since in the reference image it was kind of bunched up. I smoothed it out, created some folds, and then started on the final additions of his outfit. I completed his second pair of sleeves before moving on to his intricate straps. So he has one across his waist, two in an X across his back, and then they kind of go over his shoulders and under his arms. Now that his body was complete, I moved on to making his head, which was pretty much the same as Goku's except this one wouldn't have a nose. Speaking of his nose, I actually contemplated on if I should add it or not, but there seems to be a running joke throughout the cartoon that he doesn't have one. It's mentioned that that's how he was able to defeat Bacterian, so no nose. But he does have those luscious eyebrows, which I definitely made sure to add. By the way, I have a playlist full of other sculpts that I've created, so if you're interested in that, I will have those placed in the card above and linked in the description below. Now the pair are finally complete, along with their accessories, and we can move on to painting them. First, I coated Goku's hair with some matte black paint. Usually I would start painting the skin first, but I always run into this issue where I can't match the skin color quite correctly if I make a mistake. So I decided to just paint the colors I could match first so I could fix it more easily. Along with the hair, I also painted his belt, his eyebrows, and the bottom of his pants. I then moved on to painting his shoes and wristbands, which I covered in a dark blue. Later on, I mixed the dark blue with some purple to match the original color better. I then painted his socks a very light purplish gray and the soles of his shoe a similar color as well. Don't focus too much on the color I'm painting here, I end up lightening it later on. Now it's time for his training clothes. I mixed some orange and red to create the exact color match for his clothes. For the lettering on his back and front, I made an outline of a circle in white first because I just knew that was going to be a pain to paint yellow over something so dark. And I'm glad I did that. The yellow went on so much more vibrant with just a couple coats. Before moving on to the actual lettering, I painted on his skin, really trying super hard not to mess up. I moved back to the lettering and used this tiny brush, which really came in clutch. Do people still say that? It made the job of doing the lettering so much smoother than it would without it. To finish off the painting, I painted his eyes. I was struggling to get the exact right angle of where I wanted the pupil to be placed, so that it wouldn't look wonky. By the way, sorry for the bad angle here, but I was struggling. With the pupil good enough, I did some shading with some pastels off camera and Goku is finished. Let's move on to painting Krillin now. For Krillin, I started painting his eyebrows first. And then moved on to his belt, which I painted in a dark purple. Next, I painted his straps brown, and I know right now the color is concerning, but don't worry, it's less watery and looks much better with more layers. I painted his pants in the same color that I painted Goku's training outfit. I noticed they have similar colors between them. I moved on to painting his robes, which on the first pass was way too saturated of a yellow. So in the subsequent passes, I ended up adding a little bit of brown and orange to dull down the color a little bit. By the way, painting this area between his arms was so hard. My brushes were having a hard time fitting. I added a cream color to his leg warmers, his additional sleeve, and to the bottom of his shoes, then painted the rest of his shoe a lightish brown off camera. I also forgot to film that part. I painted his skin using the same color as Goku's. I was contemplating what expression I should give him, but I really like this sort of deadpan expression that he had in this photo, so I was going off of this for both of their looks. This is me shaking because I was so excited I actually got the expression I wanted. To finish him off, I added little dots on his forehead. Sorry for the angle again. Here's a better look at them. I gave him some shading with pastels off camera, and Krillin was finally complete. Last but not least, we can move on to painting the accessories and creating the cloud. I started off by painting his bundle in a light blue. Then I painted on a watered down darker blue to emphasize the creases and folds. Once that was dry, I mixed the original light blue color with some white to make an even lighter blue to add as highlights on the back. That's one down, two to go. I moved on to painting the power pole. I used orange paint to paint the holder and the same color to paint the pole as I did for Goku's outfit. You might notice it looks a little different to when you last saw it. Remember I said I ran into an issue with keeping it on his back? Well, the issue was I couldn't fit Krillin while it was there, so I just pivoted and added string instead so I could lay it down. I finished it up by painting the string in a cream color, and that was complete. Last, I worked on the Dragon Ball. I started off with yellow and then added some orange to make a kind of gradient, as I wanted to give the illusion that it was see-through. I don't know if that was the effect that I achieved, but I was still happy with how it came out. I added a shadow to the bottom, some highlights on the top, and completed the ball with 4 red stars. All of the accessories are finally complete, and we can move on to the final step, which was creating the flying nimbus. Once again, I severely underestimated how simple I thought this was going to be. In the end, I had multiple iterations of this cloud, unintentionally, because each time I would create one, it just didn't work out, or it just looked so bad that I couldn't possibly use it. So we're just gonna go through all of my failed attempts very quickly so you can see the whole process. Attempt number 1, the polymer clay cloud. I thought I could create the cloud using aluminum foil and polymer clay, and it was just looking like a lumpy mess, so I decided to scrap it. Attempt number 2, popsicle sticks and yarn. My reasoning was I needed something that was yellow in color already, that I also needed something fluffy, so I'll just use yarn. As you can see, it looks so bad, so into the garbage it went. Attempt number 3, cotton balls and spray paint. This was the closest to what I was thinking about making, and I was going to use this actually, even though when I spray painted it, the cotton balls ended up having like a really weird texture to them. Then I had my idea for attempt number 4. So I was thinking about how I would actually want to display this, and it hit me, why don't I just create a cloud shape base instead? Duh. So I got some poster board and I cut out a cloud shape. I cut out multiple and stacked them one on top of the other and glued them together. The edges looked a little rough, so I cut out some strips of paper to cover those up. Once that was done, I covered it in an orange-yellow color. So here's a final look with everything assembled. I got super sick while making this. I had a huge migraine flare up and then I got a regular sickness. So the fact that I even finished this project was a feat within itself. And that's why this video took so much longer than I thought it was going to. But I hope it was worth the wait and that you enjoyed watching the process of making this and that you like how they turned out. So stay tuned for my next project where I'll probably be hinting on my community tab on what it's going to be. Since Halloween is coming up, it will be sort of Halloween themed in a way. You can check out my different social media in the description. I have a TikTok and I also have the Ko-Fi that I mentioned earlier. So if you want to follow me over there, please do. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this from me. Thank you all for watching and I hope to see you all in my next video. Bye! Oops, hit the mic.